Hi, this is Paul, and this is Rough Draft for Sunday, where I run through the current version of my Sunday sermon. This week in Videoland, one of my friends in this strange little video network that I have, latched on to a YouTuber, TikTok person named Britt Hartley, who is sort of a atheist spiritual director. Now, this atheist spirituality is a really interesting phrase, and it sort of caught my attention. She was on a podcast with Rainn Wilson. Rainn Wilson was raised a Baha'i, and he's had his own little spiritual deconstruction journey, and he wrote a book called Soul Boom, where, and I got this from AI, I asked AI if I need to reference it, if I take a little quote from it to summarize a book or something, and it's really handy if I don't myself read the book, so take that as a warning. In his book, he argues that a spiritual revolution is necessary to address the world's most pressing problems, from mental health crisis and political division to climate change and economic injustice. I didn't feel too bad about letting AI write that, because that's just about all kinds of people out there, of all kinds of religious backgrounds, because spirituality is very hot. Now, one of the quotes that I played a couple times on my channel this week was really rather dramatic when she was trying to talk about, well, what does spirit mean to an atheist? Especially one that is sort of deconstructed and has become something of a materialist and material cause and effect and all those kinds of things. And she says this at 11:33 in the video. But for me, even as an atheist, if someone walks into a cathedral and there's stained glass and there's music playing, it's just beautiful. And someone says, "I feel God here." That's an experience. They're using a mouth sound, God, which just totally caught my attention, to describe what they're feeling. And even to this day, when if someone were to say that, I would say, "I feel God here too," because now we're just using a word to share an experience, a shared experience that we're having. But then when someone says, "God said this," or "did that," or "does this," or whatever, okay, that's different. That's a truth claim that we're making about God and the nature of the universe. And that's where I'm going to be much more skeptical or wary of using that word. But that word, "I feel God here," I have no problem as an atheist saying that, because that's an experience that's permeated my life. Now, as to whether the experience in me and the experience in you is the same, even though we both sort of, maybe it is, because we're both sort of making not just the God mouth sound, but all oohs and ahs and those kinds of mouth sounds. But that leads to a question: why? Is it just the way that the light shines through the stained glass in the cathedral, and is it just a stimulation of a certain kind to sort of elicit a certain emotion, and that's the God emotion leading to the God sounds and the spiritual tingles? Is that all there is? And if that is all there is, then is it any more important than the fact that when I eat ice cream, it tastes delicious? Now, since the Second World War, people have been very anxious about coming together and resolving differences, because in the early 20th century and before that, people went to war over a whole lot of things. Now, a whole lot of the things they went to war over actually were very physical and material. But part of the way that we tried to address that was to be skeptical about the nature of the universe in public. And but we tend to not be skeptical that nature can be mapped and should be mapped. But how is that connected to our intuitions that gives us God feelings or God tingles or God sounds? Is it just biochemistry or light or smells or certain arrangements of triangles in architecture? It's seldom the case of not believing. It's really much more the case of believing in something rather than another thing. But the problem is, you can't operate out of a vacuum of beliefs. Beliefs come up in us and hold us and possess us. Now, C.S. Lewis in his book Miracles talks, well, he doesn't really talk about this word spirit that much, but that's really the word we're talking about. But he noticed in this chapter called Horrid Red Things, he talks about the fact that there's a little girl who someone showed her something. She says, well, that's not poison, because poison is horrid red things, because somehow she got it in her mind that poison was connected with spiders and red pills and things like that. So there was an association and a connection that she made, because poison as such, well, you can say that certain things are poison, but even poison itself, as one person said, the dose makes the poison. When I had high school chemistry, the chemistry teacher thought it would be a really cool thing if together in chemistry class we made aspirin. But then he was very quick to tell us, now, we just made aspirin, but take my word for it, I don't want any of you tasting it or trying to ingest it, because at this dosage it would kill you. Oh. And so what we have to do is that if we in fact believe that there are other layers and levels and patterns to the world, well, they have to be sort of manifest in things that our imaginations can get hold of. A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on its heads. Its tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. The dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth, so that it might devour her child the moment she was born. She gave birth to a son, a male child, who will rule all the nations with an iron scepter. Quote from Psalm 2, a much-quoted psalm with respect to Jesus. And her child was snatched up to God and to his throne. The woman fled into the wilderness to a place prepared for her by God, where she might be taken care of for 1,260 days. Now, sort of what's happened when you read a passage like this is people kind of go crazy, and the sun and the moon, and what does this mean? And let's map this. So we have this story that seems to be communicating a spiritual reality, and we want to map it all over our world so we know what it means. And once we have it sort of oriented to our map, then we'll know how to go through the world. But after 2,000 years, people have all sorts of maps, and that doesn't mean that it's arbitrary. There are certain things that seem very clear in the story, and other things that, well, can we say that such and such a politician is the dragon, or the dragon is Satan? But what does Satan mean? A few weeks ago, we talked about the Satan in the story, and so on one hand, we have to map this, but on another hand, all attempts to map it just don't feel definitive and permanent, at least if we map it to minutia. One of the things that I've been talking about in the book of Revelation is this idea from Hendrickson's book, More Than Conquerors. And you can pick this up probably cheap and used. This is my grandmother's, Mrs. H. Vanderclay. She bought it, apparently, not my grandfather, who was the preacher. But he has this idea, which, again, he gets fairly particular. But, again, there's no crime in that. You have to. Yeah, the main sweep that he noted, which I think is fundamentally correct about this book, is that there's this idea of progressive parallelism, where with image after image after image, all interlinked and intertwined, they're telling the same story again and again and again. And it's the story about the beauty of the world and rebellion in the world and spiritual entities at power and the struggle and then the final victory over those forces. It's told in many different ways with many different images and many different symbols. And while we might not be able to sort of draw lines and map things on definitively, that's the story. And the story seems obvious to us from the reading. And we're sort of left to manage the imagery and the correlations and the connection and the correspondences as we see fit along the way. A few weeks ago, I talked about sort of these four postures that deal with revelation and time. There's the preterist approach where it says, well, everything about this book you can find. There's clear references to the first century when the book was written, and there are. And then it says, but the book purports to talk about the future, and it does. And the historicists say, well, maybe there's sort of development, and we're partial way through the book, and, well, that would seem true. And the idealist would say, yeah, but there's symbolic structural resonance where Nero has elements of Napoleon, has elements of Hitler and Stalin and Mao and other governments, and well, because these patterns repeat themselves, and that's true too. And so here, even in this chapter, people find Nero and Romans and others in the story. But they also realize that the final unrealized history is in sight, but we're not there yet, so we're sort of in the middle. And the historicists say, well, we can locate ourselves on the way to that final future. And the idealists say, well, you'll find echoes of Rome all throughout history. Just look at, for example, the architecture in Washington, D.C. You have an obelisk, and you have Roman temples, and you have all kinds of things there. And so here we are in the story. Then war broke out. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down, and the ancient serpent called the devil, or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to earth, and his angels with him. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven say, now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Messiah. For the accuser of our brothers and sisters who accuses them before God day and night has been hurled down. No longer, see again, as we talked about in previous weeks, it's sort of like a dream. How can a dragon be a prosecuting attorney before the throne of heaven? And things switch back and forth and back and forth. They triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. Therefore rejoice, you heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has gone down to you. He is filled with fury, because he knows that his time is short. When the dragon saw that he had been hurled to earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. The woman was given the two wings of the great eagle, and, well, the woman is Eve, and the woman is Mary, and the woman is the church, and the woman is, just back and forth and back and forth. And as you read the story, you get these little glimpses of where the woman is, and, well, what does she mean? And what does she mean here? And what does she mean there? So she's given two wings like a great eagle so that she might fly to the place prepared for her in the wilderness. And the desert wanderings and Israel in the desert and flying from Egypt, because all of those things sort of echo through the book. Where she had been taken for a time, times, and half a times. The book of Daniel echoes up. Out of the serpent's reach. Then from his mouth the serpent spewed water like a river to overtake the woman and sweep her away with the torment. But the earth helped the woman by opening its mouth and swallowing the river that the dragon had spewed out of its mouth. Then the dragon was enraged at the woman and went off to war against the rest of her offspring. And when we read earlier in the book about persecutions and people dying and people being hunted down, the same story that we saw in previous chapters told all over again. Those who keep God's command and hold fast to their testimony about Jesus. The dragon stood at the shore of the sea, and I saw a beast come out of the sea. He has proxies. It had 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 crowns on its horns, and on each head a blasphemous name. All the attention given to Roman Empire, emperors who take on these names of divinity, and the Christians and the Jews look at them and say, you can't say that about yourself. The beast I saw resembled a leopard, but had feet like those of a bear and mouth like that of a lion. The dragon gave the beast his power and his throne and great authority. One of the heads of the beast seemed to have a fatal wound, but that fatal wound had been healed. Is that Nero? Very interesting stuff going on about Nero in the 1st century. The whole world was filled with wonder and followed the beast. People worshiped the dragon because he had given authority to the beast. And they also worshiped the beast and asked, "Who is like the beast? Who can wage war against it? This empire is so powerful, none can stand before the legions of Rome," or how many other successive earthly empires. Then I saw a second beast coming out of the earth, one out of the sea, one out of the earth, Leviathan, Behemoth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, but it spoke like a dragon. It exercised all the authority of the first beast on its behalf, again another proxy, and made the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose fatal wound had been healed. And it performed great signs, even causing fire to come down from heaven to the earth in full view of the people. Carmel and Elijah, they faked the trick of Elijah. Because of the signs it was given power to perform on behalf of the first beast, it deceived the inhabitants of the earth. It ordered them to set up an image in honor of the beast, who was wounded by the sword and yet lived. The second beast was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast. Nero sets up this image of himself in Rome. It also forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands and their foreheads, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it's the number of a man. That number is 666. But then I looked, and there before me was the Lamb. Remember, we've met the Lamb before. Standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, 12 times 12 times 1,000, who had his name and his Father's name written on their foreheads. I heard a sound from heaven, like the roar of rushing waters, like a loud peal of thunder. The sound I heard was like that of a harpist playing their harps, and they sang a new song before the throne and before the 4 living creatures and the elders. No one could learn the song except the 144,000 who had been redeemed from the earth. They are those who did not defile themselves with women. It's Old Testament tradition about keeping yourselves from women before a battle. For they remain virgins. They're pure upon pure upon pure. They follow the Lamb wherever he goes. They were purchased from among mankind and offered as first fruits to God and the Lamb. No lie was found in their mouths. They are blameless. So we have the dragon and the 2 beasts, and they're fooling the earth. And suddenly there's the Lamb and the 144,000, a mighty army. And they're coming. Then I saw another angel flying in midair, and he had the eternal gospel to proclaim to those who live on the earth. To every nation, tribe, language, and people, he said in a loud voice, "Fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come. Worship him who made the heavens, the earth, the sea, the springs of water, not the dragon, not his beasts." A second angel followed and said, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, which made all the nations drink the maddening wine of her adulteries." A third angel followed them and said in a loud voice, "If anyone worships the beast and its image and receives its mark on their forehead or on their hand, they too will drink the wine of God's fury." Remember the 144,000. They have the name of the Lamb. The others have the name of the beast, which has been poured out full strength into the cup of his wrath. They will be tormented with burning sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and of the Lamb, and the smoke of their torment will rise forever and ever. There will be no rest day or night for those who worship the beast and its image, or anyone who receives the mark of its name. This calls for patient endurance on the part of the people of God who keep his commands and remain faithful to Jesus. Then I heard a voice from heaven say, "Write this: Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Yes, says the Spirit, they will rest from their labor, for their deeds will follow them." This is a word to a faithful church that is struggling, it's poor, it's under the boot, it's under the heel. I looked, and there before me was a white cloud, and seated on the cloud was one like a son of man, with a crown of gold on his head and a sharp sickle in his hand. This is Daniel 7, but more. Then another angel came out of the temple and called in a loud voice to him who was sitting on the cloud, "Take your sickle and reap, because the time to reap has come, for the harvest of the earth is ripe." So he who is seated on the cloud swung his sickle over the earth, and the earth was harvested. Another angel came out of the temple in heaven, and he too had a sharp sickle. Still another who had a charge of fire came from the altar and called in a loud voice who had the sharp sickle, "Take your sharp sickle and gather the cluster of grapes from the earth's vines, because its grapes are ripe." The angel swung his sickle on earth and gathered its grapes and threw them into the great winepress of God's wrath. They were trampled in the winepress outside the city, and blood flowed out of the press, rising as high as a horse's bridle for a distance of 1,600 stadia. Spiritual drama beneath moving actors in image and images. The idea of spiritual is hard to kill. You can't help when you read something to suddenly make imaginative associations, to draw things up, and to see a larger map and a larger pattern. But what? And why? And who is it for? And what is it about? Intuitively, just by me reading it, you have a sense. You fill it in. Is it perfect? Probably not. But it's doing something, it's serving, it's becoming something in you. Even people who leave the religions they were raised in come back to this idea that there must be a deeper pattern, there must be a deeper reality, there must be something else going on behind the scenes. Always have a sense that there's a depth to the surface. Now the dragon has beasts. And so the dragon above or below and the people on the earth. The Lord has saints and angels. Unseen relationships and realities are expressed in the images and visuals, and they move us and they fold us and they shape us. But the images are supposed to draw us and our sufferings into a larger story that helps make sense of our trials. If anyone is to go into captivity they will go. If anyone is to be killed with the sword they will be killed. This calls for patient endurance and faithfulness on the part of God's people. That's where we are in the story. Sometimes worse, sometimes better, but in the middle, looking for patient endurance. The story is one of struggle, suffering, and loss, but the overall map is there to encourage that justice will be done, and God will get his way, and he will reign. Every age has its trials, different proxies, different examples, different struggles. And then this song. Now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Messiah. For the accused of our brothers and sisters who accuse them before God day and night has been hurled down. These victories have been won, and the end is moving swiftly towards us. They triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. Therefore rejoice, you heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has gone down to you. He is filled with fury, because he knows that his time is short. Triumphed by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. This is the message of deliverance, but it's at midpoint. It's where we are. Amidst the images of angelic battles and the earthly central image continues to hold. Conquered by the blood of the Lamb. This story in the middle of the Christian story is seen as the hinge of all history. When the great serpent is thrown down, his proxies may rage, he may do great damage, the blood of the saints may be spilled, but in the end he will return and justice will come. Do this in remembrance of me. Hold to this in the midst of the noise and the anxieties and the panics. It isn't just about eating and drinking. It's what the mean means. That doesn't make sense. Hang on. There, that makes more sense. It's what the meal means in our relationship with heaven and earth and with each other. Amen.